The Thomas Frank era at Tottenham Hotspur is over. After a long period of poor performances, poor results, and ultimately a real loss of trust within the fan base and the players, Thomas Frank has finally been relieved of his duties. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know all your thoughts on anything that I discuss in the video. If you like the videos, hit the post notification bell so you never ever miss out on a video. I appreciate every single one of you for the support we've had on the channel in recent times. The Manchester United video did incredibly well, so let's keep on going. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I can't do it without your help. So if you enjoy what you're seeing and you like it, subscribe. Let's get back into it. I want to discuss three major things. I want to discuss why he's ultimately been let go, why it's the right decision, why I think the problems at Tottenham don't only stem from Thomas Frank, and lastly, I also want to talk on the players that are in this team. Now, as things currently stand, Tottenham sit 16th in the league, 5 points ahead of 18th place West Ham, and only 5 points because Sesko scored a last-minute goal last night to secure a point for Manchester United. Tottenham Hotspur, who won a Europa League last year and coming off of the back of an absolutely terrible season last year. And I think when Thomas Frank came into the club, we saw it as a very pragmatic signing. I thought when I saw the good things that Thomas Frank was doing at Brentford, I looked at him as a manager that was able to be flexible in games, was able to play against the bigger teams, and was just able to set up a very resolute and confident team in the Premier League. But at Tottenham Hotspur, I think one major thing we've seen throughout his time at this club is that jump from a team like Brentford to a team like Tottenham. Whether you think Tottenham are a small team or a big team, they're bigger than Brentford. And I think that's one thing he's definitely struggled with. You look at the things even off the pitch, the talking about Arsenal in the press conference, the timidness in which he speaks in the media, the way in which he conducts himself. It feels like a manager who really just feels happy to be the Tottenham Hotspur the Tottenham Hotspur manager. And I don't mean that in the sense of he's grateful for the opportunity or he's happy to be where he is, because obviously a manager who's going to do well should feel comfortable in the job that they're in. But it feels as though, or at least it felt as though, Thomas Frank felt grateful to be the Tottenham manager. He didn't feel like he belonged. It felt as though he'd won a raffle to be the manager. But when you manage those sort of huge teams, like a Tottenham, like a Man United, like an Arsenal, you also need to have an element of arrogance about you, an element of confidence, the way Ange Postecoglou had. Because I think, irrespective of the poor performances Ange Postecoglou had, and of course he went on to win the Europa League, but Tottenham finished 17th last season. They finished 17th. I think at this point in the season, Tottenham are on 29 points. They need 8 more points to eclipse how many points Ange Postecoglou had last season. And they still have 14 or 13 games to do so. So they're going to blitz their points record from last season. But one thing that I keep saying it, the way you conduct yourself and the type of football you play can get you so far in modern day football. Because for all the weaknesses that Spurs team had last year, for all the problems they had, for all the injuries they've had, which Thomas Frank has had this year as well, they still had a style of play. They still had principles that Ange Postecoglou would not resist upon. And I think that sort of stubbornness to the things you believe in, it buys you time with the fans. And ultimately, by winning that Europa League, it bought him time with the Tottenham fans. Because Tottenham fans have this belief that their team must play this sort of beautiful football. Whether you agree with it or not, that's what they believe. And Thomas Frank is, one, he's not been playing good football. And two, they're not getting the results. I look back at a game a few months ago, I think 2 games actually, the Arsenal game and the Chelsea game, where they lost 4-1 and 1-0. And of course, going into those games, Tottenham are not the favorites. We've seen it in many years. Chelsea and Arsenal routinely beat Spurs. But the way in which they lost those games really felt damaging. It felt like defeats of, oh, well, they're much better than us. It felt like they'd already lost the game before they went out there. And I don't think that's what any fan of any club wants to see. The way in which Spurs approach games, the football that they play is not entertaining. The results have been poor. The defense has been leaky. The midfield looks so lost out there. I mean, for a few months, he was running that Paulinho and Bentancur midfield, which just does not work. It doesn't work whatsoever. They bring in a Conor Gallagher in January transfer window, who I don't think is a good player, and he doesn't add anything to the team. You've had players that they signed in, Mohamed Kudus and Xavi Simons, and these sort of players are good players, but they've looked lost out there under Thomas Frank. They've looked lost. Wilson Odeber, young player. Matthias Tell, young player. Randall Kolumuani, a player who's really struggling to find a home right now. Really struggling to find a home in his career. But these aren't terrible players. They're not 16th in the league bad. Definitely not. And you see that reflected in the Champions League because they had a good run of form in the Champions League. I mean, they finished fourth in the league table. Of course, the teams they played against, I said it before, they're not that great. I think out of the 8 teams they played, 6 of them finished under 21 in the league table. And I think half of them got relegated completely out of European football. So they didn't play the Bayern Munichs and the Barcelonas and the Liverpools and the Real Madrids of the world, but they won those games. So it really makes you question, why were they so bad in the league? Why were they so bad in the league? And a lot of people will say that that's on Thomas Frank. Now, I do believe that Thomas Frank has been rightfully sacked. I genuinely believe that, because even though at the start of his time at the club, and this is where we come on to, is it an unfair sacking? Now, I don't think it's an unfair sacking, but I think in the early parts of the season, you saw a lot of good things for Thomas Frank. That game against Paris Saint-Germain, which they lost, which I thought they really put in a good showing. And Paris Saint-Germain just turned up the gears in the final few moments in the Super Cup. I thought earlier on when they played against a Burnley, they went to the Etihad Stadium, they beat Manchester City. They had a good run of form going. They looked like a very resolute side. They looked like a side that was flexible and was able to win games. But then you started to see those poor performances creeping in. I remember a game against Everton where Van de Ven scored twice and they won 3-0. Yes, they won the game, but they did not play well. I remember the game against Villarreal where they scored an own goal to win the game. They did not play well in that game. And the underlying metrics were always there, pointing us to the idea that Spurs are not a consistent team. They're not a good team. They may be getting the results, they may be winning these games, but they're not a good team. And sooner rather than later, we saw that prophesize itself in their results, because I think around November time, we've seen them lose game after game after game. The Arsenal defeat, the draw with Manchester United, the losses to Chelsea, they had a good result against Manchester City, but I think in many years, no matter how bad Tottenham are, you've seen that they can get a result against Manchester City. But then I also feel like you also have to take into consideration the injuries that Thomas Frank has had. And Ange Postecoglou last year, they gave him that benefit of the doubt. They kept on saying he doesn't have his players. I mean, you look at some of these names I'm reading out. Richarlison, whether you think he's a good player or not, that is a body that he's not had for majority of the season. Dominic Solanke's been injured for majority of the season likewise. He's just started to come back into the fray. Randall Kolo Muani has been in and out of the squad. Mohamed Kudus, just after they sold Brennan Johnson, got injured literally a day or two after. You keep on going, I'm pretty certain that Yves Bissouma has been out of the side for majority of the season. James Maddison has an ACL. Kulusevski has an ACL. Lucas Bergvall has been in and out of the team. Rodrigo Bentancur has been in and out of the team likewise. They've had a lot of players out. Even in the defensive areas, Christian Romero is not reliable. We've seen it. I think he's been suspended for about 6 games this season already. The captain of the team, Van de Ven, always susceptible to injuries. Pedro Porro, Destiny Udogie, these are players who are always out injured for Spurs. And that's just the players who are out right now. There was a period where they had even more players out injured. So I think in that aspect, you also have to give Thomas Frank a bit of the benefit of the doubt. You have to give him a bit of leeway. But the results are not good enough. And ultimately, he's been let go. And now we can move on and we can talk about how the Thomas Frank era at Spurs didn't work. And ultimately, Spurs got rid of the cancer. But I think one thing people need to remember is the authorities at this football club are running this club terribly. A lot of people were excited when Daniel Levy left the football club. They celebrated it as though Spurs had won another trophy. But one thing you can never say with Daniel Levy is he wasn't decisive. When Antonio Conte was slipping up, he was gone. When Jose Mourinho was slipping up, he was gone. Whether you thought it was a right decision or not, but he was firm in his decisions. Thomas Frank has been poor for Spurs for the last 2 to 3 months. Spurs have not won a Premier League game in 2026. Spurs have not won a game in 2026 in the Premier League. It is February 11th at the time of recording. And they are still yet to win a game. They lost last night to a Newcastle side who have looked horrible this season. They are still yet to win a game. So this sacking should have come weeks, maybe if not months ago. They're out of the FA Cup, out of the Carabao Cup, both in the first rounds, by the way. Both in the first rounds. So this is something that should have happened a long time ago. And those sort of decisions lie with the authorities of the club. The authorities of the club who are literally watching this team fall apart right in front of their eyes. I mean, we mentioned all the injuries that Spurs have. And you would think that any board who sees the manager suffering as he is, who sees the players suffering as they are. I mean, Christian Romero came out, whether you believe he was right or not, But he came out and said this team is struggling. We don't have bodies to support the team. Of course, he foolishly then went and got a red card and got himself suspended for 3 games. But they don't have bodies. And what did they do? They signed a random defender from Brazil and Conor Gallagher. How are those signings that are going to reinvigorate the squad? Give them confidence going into the second half of the season. Those are not signings that are going to do that. And then you sell a Brennan Johnson, your top goal scorer last season, who, of course, Thomas Frank was not giving him as much time on the field, but he's a body, he's an option. Spurs have so many injury-prone players. Maddison is always injured. Van de Ven is always injured. Destiny Udogie is always injured. So many players. Kulusevski is always injured. And you're selling bodies and bringing nobody to replace them. That's not how you run a football club. So we can talk about how Thomas Frank didn't do the right thing. We can talk about how his results were poor. We can talk about how he wasn't able to adapt from lowly Brentford to higher Spurs. And I think it's also a damning indictment on Thomas Frank if you look at Brentford now, who are arguably doing even better without him. After losing an Mbeumo, after losing a UM Visa, after losing Christian Norgard, their captain, and their set-piece coach has them fighting for European places. That's a credit to Keith Andrews and the Brentford model as a whole, but also a damning indictment on Thomas Frank because it really makes you sit there and think, were you the one who was really orchestrating the success at Brentford? Was it you or was it the model? Was it you or was it the model at Brentford? But at the same time, we can talk about Thomas Frank. And of course, he has been rightfully sacked. But I think if Tottenham Hotspur want to move anywhere, because right now, the objective is to escape relegation. Don't believe that Tottenham cannot get relegated. Anybody can get relegated. This is not last season. This is not 2 seasons ago when you had a Burnley or a Southampton or a Luton who were barely picking up 24, 25 points in 38 games. We have teams now, such as West Ham, Leeds, Nottingham Forest, who are near on 30 points with still 10 games to go. This league, you will get relegated if you get less than 40 points. Tottenham Hotspur can get less than 40 points this season. So the next manager they go and hire, I'm hearing rumors about Roberto De Zerbi. If Tottenham Hotspur hire Roberto De Zerbi, they are playing in the championship next season. And Roberto De Zerbi, the minute they get sacked, will leave the football club. So they need to go and make an astute decision, whether it be an interim to last till the end of the season, or you go and get a manager that you can rebuild with from today. But whatever it is they do, they need to run through this squad and get rid of the players that are not good enough. Get rid of the players that are not reliable. Get rid of the players that are not of the quality. Because there are a lot of players in that Spurs team that are not of the quality. I'm not saying they're bad players, but I think the idea that Spurs have in their mind, they see themselves as a team, especially after winning the Europa League. You should be challenging for those 6th, 7th, 5th positions, 4th positions in the league. I look at a lot of those players in that team. They are not that level. They are not that level. At least the ones who are fit. The ones who are always injured, Kulusevskis, your Maddisons, your Pedro Porros, those players are of the level, but they're never available. So you need to go and get reliable players, and that's on the board. Because I don't believe the Conor Gallagher signing, the Brazilian defender, I think his name is Souza, I don't believe those signings are Thomas Frank. That is from the board. So people need to look at the board now. Now that your first head is gone, but this is a 3-headed monster, and the other 2 heads lie in the boardroom. So it'll be interesting to see what Spurs do from here. With the rest of the season going, of course, they still have the Champions League to look forward to. So they need to hire a manager astutely. A manager who can compete in Europe. A manager who can get them away from this relegation talk, whilst also bringing back the feeling to the club. Because right now, I watched the game last night against Newcastle. That side looks dead in the water. They look like a team with no confidence, with no belief, with no idea of how they should be playing football. And I think when you start having those sort of ideas, when you start having that sort of feeling festering within a football club, it could get very, very scary. But of course, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. Do you believe that Thomas Frank was rightfully sacked? Do you believe that the problems at Spurs exist higher up in the hierarchy? Let me know all of that and a whole lot more. As I said before, if you like the video and you enjoy what you're seeing on the channel, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And I will be back with probably a Liverpool video later today. So be on the lookout. Thank you guys so much. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye.